Alright, hello once again. This is Jeff Scott of Rankin Technical College, and I've been going over the PowerPoint presentations along with writing some code for Murock's Android Programming 2nd Edition by Joel Murock for the AWD1112 or 1112 Java programming class. And I'm about to start section 2 of our book entitled Essential Android Skills. This section consists of 5 chapters. Chapter 5, where we learn about getting input from the user and displaying output. Chapter 6, where we talk about event handling. Chapter 7, where we talk about controlling the appearance of the app. Chapter 8, which works with menus, and Chapter 9, which works with fragments. Again, we are in Chapter 5, and I can tell pretty much for certain that this particular chapter will be more than one video. All right. So you'll notice we've got 3 pages of objectives here, including 14 applied apps and 6 knowledge apps. So for our applied apps, use one or more linear layouts to align widgets in one or more rows or columns. Use a table layout to align widgets in a table. Use a frame layout to stack one widget on top of another. Provide a custom layout for landscape orientation. So these first 4 things all talk about how our app is going to be laid out on its associated screen. Then we go into some of the different controls, which are referred to as widgets in Java. And some of these we've looked at already, but we'll talk about them in a little bit more depth and breadth of coverage, such as number 5, use an editable text view to allow the user to use a soft keyboard to enter text and numbers. Number 6, use a checkbox to allow the user to check or uncheck an option. Number 7, use radio buttons to allow a user to select a single option from a group of options. All right, you've all done things like this where you might be filling out a form and it asks your age group. Are you under 19? Are you 19 to 28, 28 to 39, 40 to 55, and over 55 type of thing, where you get options for each one. A spinner to allow you to select one item from a list. The most common uses of a spinner, if you've ever done this, if you do a Control P to print, and it shows you a lot of different, you get the spinner, which is like an up-down type of thing, where if I want to print more than one copy, I'm able to. Let's see if I can do one from here. I think I'll have to. So if I do a Control P to print, there's a spinner. So I can print a minimum of 1 copy and a maximum of as many as I want. All right, I'm not going to do that, but you get the idea. All right, still in our applied objectives, use a seek bar to allow the user to specify by dragging your thumb to the right or left. Use an image view to display an image. Show or hide a widget. Display a vertical or a horizontal scroll bar as necessary. If you've got too many things to put on the screen to be viewed at one time. Use a web view to display web content. Use a progress bar to show progress of an operation. All right. Going on. These are our knowledge objectives. List and describe the 4 layouts presented in this chapter. So again, we're going to talk about linear layout, table layout, frame layout, and custom layout. List and describe 3 of the widgets, so they will talk in much depth about editable text views, checkboxes, radio buttons, spinners, seek bars, and image views. Describe how the view hierarchy works, and there'll be a slide on that in just a bit. List and describe some types of input that you can get with an editable text view. List the 4 qualifiers for the drawable folder of a project. Describe what they stand for and how they work in general terms. And name the type of image that the Android API documentation recommends for Android development. Well, that one is even kind of an interesting one. So if I go out and I type in Android, how about this? Recommended Android image type. It's going to pull me out sooner or later to developer.android.com. All right. So here's what is the best image format for Android. So let's see if it's answered there. Yeah, it depends on what you need it for. And they talk about ping and they talk about JPEG. This more or less looks like a forum, so it's probably not going to help too much. Supported media formats and image formats. Under the developer.android, it's going to show you what they have in here. All right. And how to use it. Here's a little bit more depth and breadth of coverage. Probably not exactly what I'm looking for in here. Which image format shall I use and why? I like to go out to Stack Overflow. In Android, the best image format is PNG, as it is light compared to JPEG. It's easy to draw and takes less time. That actually makes sense. All right. But I guess to be sure, we'd have to see that under Android itself to make sure indeed that's exactly under developer.android.com. But that at least makes sense hearing about it. All right, so let's jump into this. So here are the layouts that are discussed in the book. A relative layout where things are put in relative to one another. A linear layout where they're put in, in vertically or horizontally. A table or tabular layout, and a frame layout where you're able to stack things on top of one another. Now notice there are two other layouts that are not discussed in the book. One is an absolute layout, which was deprecated a long time ago. Hopefully you understand the meaning of the word deprecated. All right? And deprecated means that it's still allowed to be used, but it's not recommended for new development. When I started my teaching career back in, wow, it's been a long time now, sorry, but back in the around 1990 approximately, all right, one of the first classes I taught had a DOS component in it, disk operating system. And I said, well, I don't know DOS. I was working with Unix at the time. And I was told, well, don't worry about it because DOS is going to go away anyway. It's not really that important anymore. Well, if you notice, if I come down to the bottom of my screen and I type in CMD, there's DOS, and it's there, and it's between 25 and 30 years later, and even though it's deprecated, it's still available. But my point is, when something is deprecated, you shouldn't use it for new development. There's also the grid layout, which, as you can see, was introduced with Android 4.0, the API 14, not compatible with older versions. All right. So here's a list of different widgets that you can use. Again, let's suppose, I'm just going to grab one of these and I'm going to say this rating bar because I've never used that. So if I went out to developer.android.com, so I could come in here and I could search and I could find this rating bar. All right, rating bar, I guess it was one word. But that's always the best place to at least begin your quest. I'm looking through the Android API here. API standing for Application Program Interface. So what I'm doing is, what is in here, Android is saying this is stuff you can use. You can use it and have all this stuff available to you. It's kind of a contract it's making with me. But it says if you want to use it, you must use it in the way I'm telling you to use it. So what we're saying is, if there's an import statement that you need to be able to use this, you'll provide the import statement. If there are certain methods that you can use, you must use them in the way we want them to. For instance, here's one that's called getNumStars. If you call this, you must call it where it returns an integer and it has nothing passed to it. That kind of thing. All right. So this is taken right from your book on page 123. All right, I will say too that this is from page 121 in the book, as is this. All right, but on page 121, they explain what each one of these controls mean. I would just be reading them to you, and I didn't really feel like doing that. I thought that you were all above that, so I'm not going to. So, this is the view hierarchy. You'll notice that the main, so everything is under view. It's the superclass for everything else. All right? And then after that, you'll notice as an example here, we've got view group. That's the superclass for most widgets that can contain other widgets. All right, so that's got everything that's in here. And then we've got text view, which is everything that's in here, progress bar, which is all in here, and image view, which is right here. So the text view class is the superclass for widgets that display text, things like buttons and edit text. Okay? All right. How to work with widgets. This is starting on page 124 in the chapter, and on page 124 in the chapter, the author says this chapter shows you how to use 3 more layouts that are available from Android. This is a linear layout. If you need to create an interface that displays widgets in a vertical or horizontal line, this is the one you'll want to use. Here, the width and the height have been set to match parent. Match parent meaning stretch across the screen. All right. The orientation here has been set to vertical, so it displays the 2 buttons in a vertical line, one after the other. So a linear layout displays a column or row of child widgets. This right here, this comes from this associated XML. Again, vertical layout, orientation equal vertical. All right. Now they're going to show some more examples here, 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 etc. But the common attributes are shown in the chart on the top of page 127. Those are orientation, which is going to say, is this layout vertical like we see, or horizontal, where we have them one after another, and you try to squeeze as many in the same row as you can. Weight is important because it allocates how much space is allocated to a widget. So for instance, quite often what you see is on the same line in your interface, you've got both a label, all right, our text view, and you've got an edit text, which is like a text box. But the higher the weight, the bigger the control is going to be. So oftentimes what you'll do is you'll make the text view, our label, just as big as it needs to be to hold whatever it is it's supposed to say, and then you'll make your edit text, in other words, your text box, you give it a higher weight so it stretches and it's longer. There's also gravity, which you could use to align something to the top, bottom, left, or right of its layout. And the only way that you'll learn this stuff is to play with it. So again, here was the vertical, here's the horizontal. So the attributes here, all right, the different attributes and its child widgets control the appearance of the user interface. All right, so with this horizontal one that you see right there, the buttons are displayed in a horizontal line. In other words, they're displayed in the same row if possible. Here, both of these are given a weight of 1. Since they're both given a weight of 1, they're both going to be the same size. In this third example, we used the gravity setting to tell it to center the buttons. So you can also use this stuff in combination with each other. So I can make the orientation horizontal, the weight 1, and the gravity center, for example. All right, so there's a lot of ways that this can be done. All right, next, starting on page 128, the author talks about a table layout. So if you need to create a user interface that displays controls in a grid where you at least somewhat have more control, you might use a table layout, and that's what they're showing here. This is a table layout where these are the first two rows. This row has 1, 2 columns. This row has 1, 2, 3, 4 columns. All right. So in the first row, the text view widget is displayed in the first column, and the edit text is displayed, well, in this one right here. So this, I should say, this is the first column. This is displayed over 3 columns. Here, you've got one widget in each column. If you want to create a table layout, then you use the table row element to define each row, and they show you how you would do that in here. It doesn't look all that different from the way in which you would do it, for example, in HTML. You use the table row element to define each row, and within each row you can put in as many widgets as you like. So you notice there's a table row where normally in HTML you'd call that a TR tag, but there are no TD tags, table data. You just put the data in there. If you need a widget to span multiple columns, you use this layout span, all right, as we've done right here. One thing I like about the books, the Muroc books, is on the slides here, they always show the stuff that stands out in yellow, but in your book, it's always a darker gray so you can see what it looks like. Now, the table layout has advantages over a relative layout. When you use a table layout, you only have to provide the ID for the widgets that you need to use in your Java code. All right. So for instance, the ones that display text, okay, that just do this, we wouldn't necessarily have to put IDs in for. In addition, you don't have to provide layout attributes for positioning relative to other widgets. Rather, you just set the layout span accordingly. Now, with every advantage, typically, or with advantages come disadvantages. So the relative layout has advantages over a table. With a relative, you've got more control over positioning and alignment of widgets. All right. Secondly, a relative layout will typically run faster than a table layout. That said, that doesn't mean that a table layout doesn't have its place. It does. As a developer, it's up to you to decide which one to use, how to use it, why to use it, when to use it, where to use it, etc. And a lot of this only comes with time. All right, so we looked at relative and we looked at table. The next one is a frame layout starting on page 130 in our text. And it says a frame layout is one of the simplest and most efficient types of layout. You can use this to display one widget over another as shown here. So what they're saying is you've got an image and you're displaying text over the image. So if a frame layout contains multiple child widgets, as this one does, it stacks them on top of one another. All right. This displays the first widget added at the bottom and the last widget added at the top. So the image here, the image view widget, was the first one with the image of the restaurant. That was added first. Secondly, the text view widget was added, and we also told it to display the text in white. So the result of this is we get white text displayed over our image. Now we have used the gravity here to center this horizontally, and we use the text color attribute, which we set to a hex code of #FFFFFF, which is white. Hopefully by now you're comfortable enough with color codes. So again, the frame layout is one of the simplest and most efficient of types of layouts. It often is used to display only a single child or widget, but if you've got multiple, it stacks them on top of one another, with the first one that you added put on the bottom, so to speak, and the last one you added put on the top. So there would be the associated XML. Again, the key thing here is, all right, that we are setting this up as a frame layout. So frame layout there and there. All right. You can also nest layouts. What does it mean to nest a layout? To nest a layout means that you've got one type of layout in another type of layout. All right, I have to pause for a minute. All right, I'm at 20 minutes, which I think is probably this nested layouts is not a bad place to stop. So I'm going to stop here and start with part 3. I'll pick it up, part 2 I guess it is. We'll pick it up in just a couple moments.